Hi, I'm Jake with iMed. I'm here to demonstrate the repair process of the MedFusion top case. Some of the common errors for the case on which you would basically want to replace it is going to be any cracks physically in the case. You could get a motor run error on the screen, basically whenever you're trying to do infusion. And you could have a defective keypad and a cracked lens. Just a disclaimer, iMed is not affiliated or hold any trademarks or copyrights with ICU Medical or Smith's Medical. They are the owners of that name and technology. This video is basically to give you a hands-on explanation on how to go through the repair process because sometimes using the service manual, it can be a little bit tricky or deceiving. So some of the tools we're going to use today is going to be a 1/4 inch nut driver, a couple of screwdrivers, basically a flathead, a Phillips, and then I've got a tool. It's a little scraper tool that I will post the link to down below. I find this is very helpful whenever assembling and disassembling the plunger half, which a lot of people have problems with. So what we have is our MedFusion top case. This is going to be the same process for the most part for the 3500 series and the 4000 series as well. The most important thing to do is always follow safety and use your electrostatic wristband to basically protect for static electricity on any of the circuit boards to prevent them from being damaged. So we're going to go ahead and get that tight. All right, so we're going to start by disassembling the unit and then walking through on some of any tips and trips that I have on how to do it the best way that I've found by doing this hundreds of times. Hopefully this can help you guys out in the field. So in order to remove the top case, what we're going to do is remove power from the AC receptacle, and then we're going to remove the battery. And there's just one Phillips screw holding the battery compartment. And then you can basically pull out the battery, and it's just a little push connector that you're going to pull on to remove that. 2 screws then hold the bottom case to the top case, and there's 2 Phillips screws that you're going to remove. Once you do that, you can then hinge the unit upwards because it hooks on the back of the case with some hooks, and you can remove the gray connector. We're going to set this over here. The next thing we're going to do is remove the top PCB, and we're going to do that by removing all the connectors from the size sensor to the flange detector, the LCD gray ribbon cable. The plunger sensor harness is a little J bracket on the metal screw. I would loosen this screw, do not remove, and you can swing the J bracket out of the way, and then you can pull the wire straight off the board. The next thing is going to be the keypad, and then we're going to do the size sensor, the motor. The backlight is this little white guy right here. And then we can have access to the fiber optic on the LCD. And I like to use a little flathead screwdriver in order just to lift the black tabs to slide off and remove. From that point, we're going to remove the 2 Phillips screws in order to remove the PCB from the drive assembly. At that point, you can basically lift up and remove the PCB from the unit. The next step we're going to do is going to be to remove the plunger assembly. And what I like to do is basically pull up to give myself enough travel. And I remove the 3 Phillips screws, securing the top of the plunger to the bottom of the plunger. You can remove the top, and you already heard the internals come loose. On the inside, we're going to remove those, each piece so we don't lose them, including the springs. The next thing we're going to do is remove the Phillips screw holding the L bracket to the bottom case. Remove that. And then we can slide the bottom case down, giving us more room to remove the white cable from the plunger PCB. At that point, there's going to be 2 Phillips screws holding the L bracket to the drive assembly. We're going to remove those. And at this point, we can slide the L bracket up over the wiring harness and remove the square rod, and slide the lower bottom plunger up, and then go back to the main drive assembly. There's going to be 3 Phillips screws and 3 metal standoffs that we have to remove next. Removing the metal standoffs, there's 3 of them. And then from this point, we're going to remove the 2 Phillips screws that are holding the size sensor from the drive assembly. And then on the top side, there's a black gray saddle that holds the syringe down. I pull it up, hold it with my left thumb, and with my right hand and screwdriver, I remove the black Phillips screw that's holding the size saddle onto the sensor and remove it. And you can gently let go. And you can basically remove your size sensor as the entire assembly. Now that we've got that removed, we can basically pull the drive assembly out about 45-degree angle and slide the shaft all the way out, nice and gentle. Make sure we don't damage anything. And the drive assembly has been removed. For the next step, we're going to remove the actual LCD assembly itself, and it's basically held on by 2 1/4-inch nuts that we're going to use the nut driver to remove. If it gives you a hard time, you can always press down on the metal standoff on the inside and to provide a little extra tension, so that way you can safely remove the nut without it free spinning on the backside. Once that's done, it's the exact same process. It's held only on one side and then in grooves on the back side. So you basically pull it out and up, and you've removed the LCD assembly. There are going to be 2 poly bushings that you're going to want to keep. Don't lose these, everybody normally does. Just hold those to the side for later. The last thing to remove is going to be the flange sensor for the syringe, and it's held on by 1 Phillips screw and 1 E-clip. The Phillips screw removes the actual sensor itself. Then the next step is going to be an E-clip on the inside that holds the spring and poly bushing. I use a small flathead screwdriver to go in and basically just pry off the E-clip, so that way it can basically slide out the flange holder and the spring and poly bushing. Now that we've correctly removed everything from the top case, we're going to reassemble it back with our new case that we have. A tip I recommend is when first time you do it, there's going to be a plastic cover right here. Go ahead and remove that so you don't forget it for later. Otherwise you'll have to go back in, take it apart in order to do. In order to put it back, I would recommend starting with the flange sensor first. It's the same process but backwards. We're going to basically install the holder halfway in order to install the spring and the poly bushing that holds the spring in place. All you do is slide it on and then push it in back through. And then you're going to push it in, the bushing down, so you can reinstall the E-clip. Now that you've done that, you can reinstall the sensor with the one Phillips screw. And then we're going to install the display, again taking the poly bushings that we removed earlier, reinstalling those back onto the thread, holding the keypad flex circuits out of the way. We're then going to reinstall the LCD back on the inside on the ledge, and then it's going to slide on the top back over where the poly bushings are. Holding the keypad down, we're going to then reinstall the two nuts that were holding the LCD to the case. Then we're going to install the drive assembly next, doing the exact same thing but backwards, of reinstalling the shaft through the case at a 45-degree angle, and then we can pivot it back into its resting spot. Remember to hold all the cables out of the way and not get anything pinched or tucked under that shouldn't be for later on. On the keypad, it's important to note that the ground strip has a black side, that is the ground side of the keypad. It's important that this is grounded to the drive assembly in order for the keypad to work properly. So you're going to have to effectively line up the hole in the ground pad to the case, to the drive assembly, and then you can reinstall the metal standoff to hold it in place. Reinstalling the three standoffs on the drive assembly. And then the black cover for the motor. Followed by the following Phillips screws we took out earlier. The next thing we're going to do is install the size sensor. Again, I recommend always verifying that the black peg on the sensor is installed into the cradle that's spring-loaded on the plunger before installing, to make sure that you don't have any calibration issues later on. Simply just slide back in the hole, back down. There's going to be two Phillips screws that hold that back in place. Go ahead and reinstall those now. I like to slide the orange flex circuit all the way down as much as I can. On this part, I like to take a screwdriver to kind of get it going, pull it up. Again, I hold it with my left thumb, install the cradle with my right hand, and secure it by screwing it in place with my right hand while holding it with my left. I find that to be the easiest for me. You need to do what's best for you, but I find that's the best for me. The next step is going to be probably the most tedious for most people out there, but practice makes perfect, and doing it several times, you'll become a pro at it. The reinstalling the plunger assembly is definitely a practice game and patience game. I reinstall the bottom case first, and then I install the L bracket. There is a notch on the L bracket and a notch on the shaft that have to line up in order for you to make sure that the orientation is correct. Then we're going to reinstall the two screws that secure the L bracket to the shaft. And then we're going to pull the bottom plunger up to secure the L bracket and the plunger PCB. by reinstalling the screw that holds it in place. Now that that's secure, I like to reinstall the plunger wiring harness next. And there are some grooves in the plastics that you can use to secure the wire in place. Then I install the square rod next, drop it down, and you're going to basically feel around for it to catch in the square, and then it'll drop into place once it does, just like that. The next step, I like to reinstall the O-ring, the gasket for the plunger next. And then install the spring-loaded gears. What I do is I push down on the bottom side where the plungers are. I push them down all the way, and I keep it all the way down while I'm installing the springs, in order to make sure that I'm installing the springs and the gears at the same location every single time. Again, I install it with the spring installed and just enough of a tension where it's not smacked up all the way against the sensor on the board, but there's a little bit of a gap, maybe 1 tooth difference on the aligning process. And I do the same for the other side while holding that one in place. And if it doesn't line up, just pull it up and slide it back 1 tooth on the gear, and then push it down. Make sure to line the springs. And then I put the plunger on top to hold it with the lever. Now at this point, in order to put the top on and hold it at the same time, I like to use this tool in order to hold it together while I align the top case on the square rod from earlier. And I'm able to basically line it up and then pull it out and snap it in place. Reinstalling the screws that secure the top and the bottom plunger halves together. This one you got to push down a little bit. It's 3 screws total. It's important to get this gasket right all the way around because this unit will see a lot of fluid action, and you want to basically protect the internals of this as much as you can. Once you install it correctly, both the plunger arms should be all the way down, and when you actuate it, it should go all the way up. Very smooth action, no grinding, no clunking, no jerking. And once you do, it should flow in and out very smoothly. Going back to the board, we're then going to reinstall the main board, and you do so, there is a ledge on the inside of this drive assembly that the back of the board slides into first. And then after you do that, again, removing all the cables out of the way. There we go. It goes into the slot. You're able to put it back down. We're going to put the Phillips screw in the middle to secure that. We're then going to install the one on the left, my left, your right, back down. Now the third hole again is supposed to remain empty because whenever you put the bottom case back on it, the screw goes from the bottom case through the board to the top case to secure it properly. We're then going to go and install all the cables, do the size sensor, the flange half, the LCD data, the plunger wiring harness. Again, on this J bracket, I just get it on the metal sheath, plug it in, swing it around, secure this Phillips screw basically keeps it from pulling on it. On the other side of the board, we're going to install the backlight. We're going to install the fiber optic cable back on the LED. We're going to install the motor, the size sensor, and lastly, the keypad itself. At this point, we're going to go ahead and reinstall the bottom case. There are 3 notches on the inside of the case that the bottom case grips onto and swings down, and then we can secure it with screws. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and reinstall the gray connector for the interconnect board on the bottom before we do that. Then at this point, we're going to go ahead and tighten those 2 Phillips screws. Reinstall the battery. And lastly, installing the battery cover. 1 Phillips screw just secures that in place. And that is the replacement process for the top case for the 4000 and 3500 top case assembly. Now, it is recommended to always follow the OEM service manual anytime you're replacing any of these parts. There is a guide at the back that basically says which part you replaced and what steps they recommend. I personally recommend once you're done, you complete the full calibration of the unit, including the battery, the size sensors, the occlusions, everything, and then completing the full annual maintenance checklist to make sure that the entire unit works properly. At that point, once you've completed all those tests and checks, then you're able to finish up your documentation and return the device back to service.